Formula One's pre-season testing is over, and it's been a productive and busy 3 days for all of the teams with impressive reliability throughout. We'll get into the action and review what we've seen over the whole of testing in just a moment. Welcome to the testing show. So pre-season testing is over. How do you think it went for everyone?
I think it went relatively smoothly for everyone. Obviously, we saw really good reliability throughout most of the grid. There were a couple of problems this morning for Stake. They had the rear off the car for a while. Also a couple of issues for Lando Norris and McLaren. I think he had a clutch issue, so he only actually managed to complete 20 laps. We also had another red flag because of the drain cover issue, which apparently will be fixed with some concrete for next weekend, the race next weekend. But Perez was the one to run that over and actually got some floor damage because of it. And we had Adrian Newey underneath the car checking the floor, making sure everything was all right. But yeah, relatively smooth day, maybe a couple of hiccups here and there. But again, I think reliability was really the theme of testing this year. Everybody looks pretty solid, so I'm looking forward to seeing what the season brings. So on the back of these 3 days of testing, how is the constructors' order looking for you?
I think, unfortunately for some, unfortunately for others, I think Red Bull is going to be at the top again. I've got them as my #1 team at the moment. I just think the RB20 just looks, very reliable. They barely had any issues. They had some issues in Sergio's hands on day 2, but they seemed to miraculously go away when Max got in the car, so I'm not sure what's going on there. But Max was pumping in some really good fast laps, and it looks like their race pace is fairly consistent as well. And I think the step they've made is slightly bigger perhaps than any other team has made in an effort to catch them up. So I would find it difficult for any other team to catch them up enough to overtake them as #1 in the constructors. Do you agree, or have you got someone else on #1?
Yeah, I've got Red Bull as well. I think if you just watch them through the corners, they look so stable. The car looks very, very planted. And so I think it would be stupid not to put them at the top of the list as well, considering what they did last year. I kind of wanted to put Ferrari up there just in case Sergio couldn't pull his weight. Obviously, Max, I think, is going to be the leader of the team again this year. I wanted to put Ferrari at the top, but I just think Red Bull are going to have that slight edge over the whole season.
Yeah, I agree. I've got Ferrari as my #2, actually, because I think they look really impressive. Their car looks really impressive over these 3 days. They've had really good pace. They've been up there in the times for the 3 days. But again, I wonder, I don't think there's going to be any problems with their performance as such, but I wonder if under the stress of the races as the season goes on, whether we'll see other little things faulting, like their strategies and their pit stops, all of that stuff kind of unfolding again. So that would be the only thing that would prevent me from putting them at #1 at the moment. But I think they're looking really strong otherwise.
Yeah, I agree. I think they look similar to how they did in 2022. They were looking very, very strong in Bahrain, and then it kind of fizzled out throughout the season. Not that I'm expecting exactly the same thing to happen there, but I think that Red Bull are obviously going to be the strongest. Maybe we'll have a fight for pole between Red Bull and Ferrari in Bahrain, which would be very cool to see. Yeah. But yeah, I just think Red Bull are going to pip them over the whole season, so I've also got Ferrari in second.
Yeah. In third, controversially perhaps, given Mercedes were up there last year, I've actually gone for McLaren in P3.
So have I.
So have you, yeah. I just feel like they obviously had a great end of last season. If they can carry on that momentum, which it kind of looks like they've been able to do. Yes, Lando had a bit of a slow morning today. He only got 20 laps in or so, but that was probably because of the red flags. I think they've had a couple of issues over the test, but I think the car looks quite impressive. It looks planted through corners and things like that. So I don't think they've got any problems preventing them from carrying that momentum forward at the moment. What was your opinion on McLaren?
Yeah, I think considering their huge development step last season, they were already slightly up on Mercedes. And I think Mercedes might have caught up to that gap over the break, but I think McLaren will have furthered themselves from that again. So there's going to be a little bit of work for Mercedes to catch up to McLaren. So that's why I've put them in third, and that's why I've got Mercedes fourth. Yeah,
I've also got Mercedes in fourth, actually, funnily enough. I think James Allison has said that the car, he thinks, has got a higher ceiling for development this year, but whether that ceiling is higher than every other team remains to be seen, I suppose. But I feel like McLaren, with their wind tunnel and the personnel they've got on board, I just feel like, again, as you said, they're going to be able to make more of a step than Mercedes have made because they've started from the right place, perhaps from the beginning. Whereas Mercedes are still kind of recovering from their poorer car concept.
Exactly, because they were following the zero pods development concept until start of last year. Now they've switched development concept. They're only going to really be getting to the ideas that the other teams came to at the start or sort of midway through 2022, maybe the start of 2023. So I feel like they're still just going to be a little bit behind. Maybe if they can develop on this concept now this season, they might be able to catch up ready for 2025. But I just don't see them being at the same level as Ferrari and McLaren, who have a solid concept that they've now worked through for 3 years.
Yeah, I completely agree. Who have you got in P5?
In P5, I've got Aston Martin.
Me too.
We've got the same list. Yeah, I wanted to put them there because I don't think they're going to be as strong as Mercedes. They're not looking quite as good as they were at the start of last season.
To be fair, that would be difficult to do. They did make a massive step, and that shocked everyone how good they were. So they were never going to do that again. But I do agree, they don't look as positive.
Exactly. But I still don't think they're going to have dropped off too much. I can't remember where they finished the Constructors last season.
I think it was fifth.
Fifth, yeah. So I think probably remaining around that same kind of point, to be honest. I don't see them making a huge jump again unless something significant happens. Maybe if they're able to bring like an upgrade package before Bahrain and surprise us all, then they might make a ginormous step. But unless that happens, I see them staying at fifth, to be honest. Yeah,
I've kind of got them in fifth for the same reasons you have, but also for the reason that they have Fernando Alonso. I think if they didn't have Fernando right now, I think they'd probably be sixth in my list. But I just think that the Fernando effect is going to boost them up like we saw last year. He put them on the podium.
Absolutely. Fernando's very consistent.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think he is going to be what helps them stay in fifth, but I can't see them again making any more steps than that.
Yeah, but I mean, we also have the question that Fernando's out of a contract at the end of this year.
It's true.
And if we've got the empty Mercedes seat, if he signs something with Mercedes, then I don't think he's going to want Aston Martin to be right up there at the end of the season. So maybe he'll purposely drop off performances. We know he's a wily old fox. He can come up with these little things. But yeah, I think everything remained the same. I'm going to keep Aston Martin in P5.
Yeah, I agree. In P6, I've gone for Visa Cash App RB or RB
So have I.
or Racing Bulls, whatever we're calling them. I feel like they are my most improved team from last year to this year. I think the car looks very different. Obviously, it's following the RB19 concept a little bit more closely now, and they've taken the parts that they can legally within the regulations to build this car. But I think you can tell. I think it looks more planted through corners. It's going where the drivers are steering it. It's not so oversteery, understeery. And it just looks like a better rounded car, I think. In the hands of their experienced lineup now of Daniel Ricciardo, and Yuki Tsunoda's on his fourth year in Formula One and fourth with that team as well. So he knows the team inside and out at this point. I can see them potentially getting some top fives, as was Daniel's request for the season. He wanted some top fives. Potentially then getting on the podium if other teams falter through the season. Do you agree with those points, or have you got them in P6 for a different reason?
No, I do agree with those points, but I think they were having a really good bit of development towards the end of last season. And if they carried that through into this season, then I can see them working their way up, maybe even beating Aston Martin by the end of this season. I was expecting the car to be a little bit more RB19-esque, to be honest. It doesn't look, I thought we were just going to see a clone of the RB19 and, we were going to have to just kind of accept that. It's a little bit more of its own unique car than I thought it would be. I think it's taken the has it taken the RB18 suspension, I think? I don't think it was
19,
the RB19.
I think.
Oh, it is the 19 suspension. Well, yeah, so obviously considering that that's the championship car, the Constructors' Championship car, we know Red Bull had very, very strong suspension. I think Adrian Newey was actually working on the suspension. He identified that as one of the key points that he wanted to develop. So obviously that's going to be very, very strong. Yeah, and I think just having that closer relationship on a technical level with Red Bull is definitely going to be beneficial to them. So yeah, that's why I've put them in P6.
So who have you got in P7?
I've got Alpine in P7. I'm not really too sure why, to be honest. I didn't want to put them any further back, and I didn't want to put them any further forward. They weren't looking massively strong to me. I think they had quite a quiet test, to be honest. I don't feel like I really heard much about them, apart from them putting on paint, a little bit more paint earlier today. But yeah, they don't seem overly impressive. They don't seem, terrible. So P7, I think, is a pretty safe place to put them.
Yeah, it's for those reasons that I've got them in P8, actually. I think they didn't really stand out. I didn't feel like they did anything massively special. Maybe I missed that.
Yeah.
But I think they're in an okay place, but it doesn't feel like they've got many exciting prospects for this year. They're not hyping themselves up, and that might be a tactic. We don't know, obviously.
Yeah.
They might come into the first race now and be top 5. You don't know.
Yeah.
But that's why they're P8 for me. I've got Williams in P7 actually.
Okay.
Which is where they ended last year.
Yeah, I've got Williams in P8, so we've kind of done a little swap around there. Yeah.
Yeah. So I've got Williams in P7. I think, because I can't see them going down from last year, and I also can't see them going up. I don't think that they're going to be worse than last year, because their car seems on the same level but different. They've said that it's worse in straight lines, whereas last year it was better, and it's better in the corners, whereas last year it was worse in the corners. And so I think they're just having a bit of an adjustment period, getting used to that and finding out what works for this new car. And Logan today said that the engineers are having to find the new ways of dealing with the car and the different setups, because they were so used to having a car with those characteristics. So I think if they can get on top of that quickly, which they should be able to do now under James Vowles, I think he's the right person to be leading them into this new phase of their development. So if they can carry on with that momentum, I think they should kind of stay where they are despite those problems.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think if they can take away some of their straight line speed and change that for cornering speed, then they should perform better over the whole season, rather than just in specific tracks like Monza, the ones with the long straights. I think definitely James Vowles is the right guy for the team, but I think it's still too early for him to have had a massive effect on their development. I know that he's putting in a lot of infrastructure and stuff for the team to improve, 5-10 years down the line. So he's not expecting them to make a massive jump either. So I don't think he'll be disappointed if they do finish P7 or P8. But yeah, I don't see them dropping down any further, but I also don't see them going up much further. Maybe they'll have some nice races. Maybe Monza will be strong for them again. I know Alex Albon was flying around Monza last year. Maybe we'll get a Williams podium. I don't know. Maybe that's a little bit bold. But yeah, I'm happy to keep them in P8, because I just don't see them dropping any lower, and I don't see them being much higher, to be honest.
Yeah, I agree. And it's for that reason, actually, that I've put Stake in P9 and Haas in P10. I can't see them changing
exactly the same.
much versus last year. Yeah, I think Stake has just got that similar vibe, despite the effort they've put in, I think, to kind of alter their team brand. And they've obviously apparently done a complete overhaul of their car. I can't see at the moment how that will help them beat these other teams who seem to have made bigger steps, I think.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you agree.
Yeah, I do. I think Stake, in my opinion, are just going to stay in sort of that, P9, P10 in the constructors until they get that Audi support. I think their development isn't particularly exciting. I know they've changed their suspension and a few other bits around the car, but again, it still doesn't look excellent to drive. I know Valtteri and Zhou were both kind of oversteering and understeering quite a lot through various corners. I just don't see them as being particularly good. And yeah, I think while everybody else has made a decent step, I don't see them having made such a significant step.
I think even if they have made that significant step, technically speaking, from what we've seen over these 3 days of testing, I almost feel like they don't understand how to make those things work for them. Because even today they were still having issues. Like, obviously it's only a 3-day test. That's very limited time to get used to a completely brand new car, if that's what it actually is that they're saying it is. But I just felt like today it looked like the car, as you said, was very oversteery, understeery, didn't have a very good balance to it, didn't look particularly speedy, and it looked just a bit of a handful. And so I think that will come down to them getting used to this new car concept. And it depends then how quickly they can do that on what kind of a step they can make when it comes to races versus technically speaking.
Yeah, perhaps it is more of a setup-based thing. And as they experience the car through more races and they're able to gather more data, maybe they will pick up some performance towards the end of the season in some of the later races. Obviously, we've got a record-breaking 24-race-long season. There's plenty of time for them to gather data and create good setups. But yeah, it wasn't looking particularly good for them during testing. But again, that could change. Formula One is an ever-changing sport. Maybe they'll be P1 by the end of the season. So
you never know.
Yeah.
And so I think Haas in P10 is for different reasons. I think they were feeling very positive coming out of the test. Ayo Komatsu, their new team principal, said they completed most of their run plan. The drivers' feedback was very positive. But for me, I feel like Haas will stay P10 until they get the investment to get out of being P10.
Yeah.
And at the moment, I don't see that that's happening. So I think they're going to stay where they are until they have a bit more investment and perhaps start building some of their own parts. I know at the moment they're using a substantial number of Ferrari parts. and when they can start getting and becoming a little bit more of an independent team and moving away from that reliance on Ferrari and being a bit of like a almost Ferrari B team, but not really, because they don't run in that way, but the parts they use set them up in that way, kind of. Until they can get away from that and become a bit more of an independent constructor, I just think they're going to be hanging around that P9, P10.
So just before we conclude today's episode of the testing show, let's have a look at the final classification from the final day of testing.
Charles Leclerc for Ferrari's out front after day 3 with the fastest lap of 1:30.322. In P2 is George Russell after he completed 67 laps this afternoon, and Zhou Guanyu for Stake ended the day in 3rd. Max Verstappen's afternoon running sees him end the day in 4th, while Yuki Tsunoda is in 5th for RB. Alex Albon is in P6 after completing a full day in the car, and Oscar Piastri is in P7 following a productive 91 laps this afternoon. Rounding out the top 10 is Fernando Alonso in 8th, Carlos Sainz in 9th, and Sergio Perez in 10th. Nico Hülkenberg is 11th for Haas after completing 89 laps today. Lewis Hamilton is P12 after his morning in the car, and Lance Stroll is 13th. In 14th is Lando Norris, who only completed 20 laps during his running this morning. Gasly is 15th, with Magnussen in 16th and Ocon in 17th. Valtteri Bottas is P18 after he completed 28 laps for Kick Sauber this morning. And Daniel Ricciardo completes the leaderboard in 19th after his race runs this morning saw him complete 70 laps.
That's pre-season testing done for 2024, and it's been a busy 3 days for everyone. The next time these cars and drivers head out onto the track will be for the Bahrain Grand Prix next week, when the 2024 season kicks off. Thank you for tuning into the testing show over these 3 days. We hope you've enjoyed the insight and debriefing all of the action with us. For more of this content through the season, make sure to subscribe and follow us on Instagram for more analysis, deep dives and insight into what we'll see through the year. Thank you for watching and goodbye for now.